I have Jerry Jordan right now. Look at this book you brought me. Thank you very much. This is his life's work that just came out in October of this year, which I went through. It's an amazing piece. So how long did it take you to put that together?
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah.
And why did you do it? Why did you go, okay, I need a book? Or did it?
No,
Or did
I
you?
didn't. You know, I hadn't even thought of one.
Yeah.
But I kept having collectors go like, you have a fascinating story. You
Yeah.
should tell your story. I go, well, I'm telling you. No, I'm talking about like in a book. I'm going like, man, you know what it takes to write a book? I said, the thing is this. I don't want to write a book, and we take it to my family reunion, and that's as far as it goes.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure I have a story that's interesting enough to tell. They go, like, believe me, it is. So I had that enough.
From many people, probably your dealers too. Were,
Enough. And I go, like, I should pay attention. So what really happened is a collector of mine called and says, can I come to Taos and take you to lunch? I said, sure. I have something I want to talk over with you. Okay. So when I get there, he says, I bought a book of Irving Brown's when it came out that contained a painting in it as well. And I'm suggesting, I'd known him since early 90s, from Lubbock, Texas.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting you write a book, tell your story, because you have a fascinating story. And if you'll put an original painting in that, I'll pay you $4,500 for the first copy. Really? So what does that look like? And he explained it to me. I said, well, that puts a different twist on writing a book.
Right.
That's just kind of around. So we ended up making 66 of those in a clamshell presentation
Right.
that has a 6x6 original painting with it,
Wow.
representing 66 years of my painting.
And
So
that's
there's
how long you've been
66
painting.
books,
Yeah.
66 years of painting with a 6x6 image in the book.
So when you started doing that, I'm sure the first 20 went pretty quick.
Yeah, it's about the way it works. That's about the way it works.
And then you're like, 66, huh?
Yeah, 66. I still got to paint 66.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting, but you're right about that.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I've worked with artists and stuff, and sometimes we also, as dealers, I'm sure your dealer's like, this is a great idea, let's do it. And you commit to it, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, I just committed to something that's going to take me a lot of work and effort.
And a lot of years to sell, maybe,
Maybe.
It costs a ton of money to make.
Oh, yeah, it's a great
really
book.
did.
Yeah. How many are in the edition?
There's 2,000 in the edition.
Yeah, that's right.
And 66 are special, and the rest of them
Are those 66, are there any of those still available?
Yes, yes,
And
that's
where
right.
would people find those? We might as well just...
Well, we're selling most of them ourselves.
Yeah, so they can just contact you
Yes.
if you wanted to. And how would they get a hold of you just on that?
That's going to be an interesting answer.
Like through
my
Instagram?
My
or something?
website,
Yeah.
Jerry Jordan, at jerryjordantaos.com.
Yeah, .com. Yeah,
And so anyway, we're selling most of them, but Legacy has them and a few of them.
yeah.
So anyway, there you
Yeah,
go.
I get it. Yeah. And so it's an interesting story. I like this. That's how, you've said this 3 times now, so I want to hear about this interesting story. So tell me where you grew up. I can hear that there's a Texas accent that's been in there.
So what do you hear?
Well, for me, I hear Texan.
Texas.
Yeah, because my mother was West Texas.
I did a photo shoot with a dear Indian gentleman from Taos, Pueblo. And he goes like, tell me, Jerry, where you're from. I said, from Brownfield, Texas. He said, he's from Brownfield, Texas.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't get away from it.
No.
I was born in Lubbock, Texas.
Yeah, so was my mom in that area.
Really?
Uh-huh.
I was born in Lubbock, Texas, raised on a farm at Ropesville, between Ropesville and Meadow, which is about 18 miles out of Lubbock.
Which way is that?
Toward you,
Yeah.
south, almost due south.
Was that a farm or a ranch?
We lived on a farm,
Yeah.
1,200 acre cotton farm.
Oh, yeah.
And then at 14, we moved from the farm and built a house my parents did in Brownfield itself.
And did they get rid of the farm? And
No, they kept farming, but fortunately for me, being part of the whole story really, is moving to Brownfield was a lifesaver. I had flunked the 3rd grade in Meadow, and again the 7th grade. And they kept saying to me, or to my parents, he's quite smart, but we just don't think he's trying.
Right.
And so when we moved to Brownfield, we checked in to the new school, and the principal asked the question, why are these two failures? And I said, well, I don't know what they're saying. I don't absorb it, so I was dyslexic, in the sense that not the words got jumbled up as much as like, what did you just say? Can you say it again?
Mm-hmm.
When I notice when I'm trying to read something like on a television screen or a paper or anything, I have to really look at it and decide what it is they're going to be talking about, and then I can prepare myself to hear what's going to be said.
Mm-hmm.
And by then, if it's a television flash, it's already gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm slow at that, which I think is part of the bent toward art,
Yeah, I'm sure.
art and music.
Probably helps you in a way.
Probably helps.
Yeah.
So the principal said, we have a person here that teaches a summer school. Would you be willing to go to her if I can call her and she has an opening?
Right.
I said, well, absolutely.
Right.
So I went to Mrs. Eunice Jones from the summer of between the 7th and 8th grade until my junior year. All summer
Every summer.
and after school.
Wow.
Probably the sophomore year. But I was able to graduate with decent grades. Until then, there was Fs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do science projects with art to get an A plus, which might bring it to D minus.
So you were making art at what age do you remember starting?
I
making
started
art?
at 13,
At 13 is really when you
Yeah.
started making art.
and we were at my father's parents' home on a ranch in Ada, Oklahoma. Ada,
I
Oklahoma.
know where that is too.
And until then, we go out there and we'd stay a week or 10 days at a time in the summer. It's kind of boring as a kid.
Yeah.
So I'd take pot holders, those pot holders you'd weave,
Uh-huh.
and I just spend my time at night because it gets dark at night and there's no television, there's no nothing,
Right. And say
And so we're going to go again, and my mom wants to go stop by and get some pot holders. I said, why don't you get me a paint by number set? Let's go get a paint by number set. Why I said that, I do not know. Hadn't been nothing until that time. So I got a cat and painted it. It was kind of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, you would go blind, I think, eventually trying to find all those numbers,
Right.
but there was paint left over.
Uh-huh.
And my grandmother, who knew nothing about art, and didn't even know there was galleries or museums, I'm sure,
Right.
thought it was the grandest thing she'd ever seen in her life. I go, really? You think that's good? I love it. I love it. I'd love to have one, Jerry Brett. And so I'll have some paint. Let's go. Do you have anything I can paint the remaining paint with? Well, we went and bought some poster board, and I got a National Geographic down, and I did two paintings with leftover paint. And they're in this book. You'll eventually get to
It's
see them.
amazing that they didn't get tossed over the years.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Now, most of these
Who
paintings
saved those? Was that your mom?
Most of them were given to aunts and grandmothers.
I see, and
And
they
they
saved
held
them.
them, and when they got
Yeah.
aged, they seen that I got them back.
Yeah.
And fortunately, and occasionally I get some old ones back, these days. So anyway, it felt so good, and I enjoyed it more than anything.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that would be fun. So we went home and I bought oil paint and canvas board, covered
Yeah.
canvas board. And those paintings were represented in here as well. And so you'll see how the beginning was. And then fast forward, and this was in the 60s, in 1961.
How old were you then?
Well, I was born in 44. I think it was, I started at 13. But the story I'm going to tell you, I was 17.
I see.
So my mother's parents lived in Paris, Texas, out of Paris, Texas,
Yeah.
Blossom.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. And so there's going to be an outdoor event at the Wade Park, Paris, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
There's this little dirt road that you had to get on to go to the park. And then as we're almost to the park, you can see it over there, is this little art studio with a painting in the window. And I'm intrigued. I'm going like, oh my God, that's an artist studio. I want to go see it. So when we got a chance, my brother and my mom and I went over to see Mr. Thrasher, W.R. Thrasher's studio.
Uh-huh.
He painted for the Taos Brothers furniture store in Dallas, as well as sold him out of his studio. But he had 35 paintings ready for market. He had a little shelf built on the wall. They set the wet canvas on, just runs and dry.
Right.
The frame was on the bottom. And I'm captivated.
I'm sure.
Oh my, well, I'm painting some pretty poor paintings that I thought was pretty well done.
All your parents loved them and everybody.
Isn't it wonderful, though, that we are insulated in those earlier ages
Yes.
to not know how poor we might be or what little we might know.
But in their eyes, you really were great.
In their eyes, they weren't exposed at all.
They weren't, and neither were you. You probably never had been into an art gallery until you went into Thrasher's art gallery, maybe.
Only thing I'd seen up to date was a field trip to Texas Tech Museum, and there were the Peter Hurd's museum murals.
Yep.
And this is also part of the story. And part of that was John Meggs was his protege, helped him paint them things as a young person. Later, John Meggs shows up back in my life again. So I'm smitten with Mr. Thrasher. So he's ready for us to go. You can tell. And Mr. Thrasher, I would like to come study with you this coming summer.
Yeah.
And I don't do that. And I said, well, we can talk about that. I had already become a distributive education student in the junior year of my high school. And I'd gotten a job at the First National Bank in Brownfield. My intentions was to make banking my career.
Yeah.
And I saw that farming was pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Pretty risky, and the banking sounded better.
Yeah.
I intended to be president of that bank until I walked in Mr. Thrasher's studio. I'm going like, Mr. Thrasher, this is what I want to do. Now I work at the bank, but this is what I want to do for a profession. And I need to book my vacation to be able to come back to you this summer. He said, well, I don't do that. I'm too busy. Well, I graciously thanked him and went home, and I wrote him a thank you letter, reminded me what I'd asked for. And so I'm really asking for you to, again, it would be very helpful that I could book a vacation this coming summer. Now, this was in September of '61. So he didn't answer the letter. And I'm going like, it could have gotten lost. You'd be,
Right.
you just
Possibly. Probably not.
Not likely, but I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. So I wrote a second letter and said, I have written you a letter, but it could have gotten lost. I want to make sure that you did hear from me, and it reiterated the same thing. He didn't answer that. I sent a third letter. He didn't answer that. Okay, now he's ignoring me. And I don't take well to that. And so I decided to paint a 12:16 copy of a fall scene of Robert Wood, and I sent it to him, let dry, sent it to him.
Yeah.
And he didn't answer that. Now I'm 17.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, I gave you the benefit of the doubt the first couple of letters, but now I've sent you 4 letters with a painting.
Right.
And you're ignoring me. I want my picture back.
You wrote him a letter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now this is the 5th letter.
Yeah.
I want my picture back. And so I get a letter in 3 days, and his wife had written it. She was an English teacher at one of the local schools. I've never met a kid this young with more audacity in my whole entire life. You have 2 weeks in June this summer.
That's fine. Now, would that have been after your senior year or right before your senior? Yeah.
So I spent 2 weeks with him,
Yeah.
and I'm smitten. So I was supposed to pay him $5 an hour to watch him paint for the first 4 hours, and then I was supposed to leave, and he's going to paint the afternoon. But he really took a liking to me. It was, I can look back now, he's so impressed with the enthusiasm and the determination is really what it was.
I'm sure.
He said, well, you know, I'm going to change my format here. You can watch me paint the first 4 hours. And then we'll have lunch. You can go to lunch. No, by the way, you just have lunch with us.
Yeah.
And so I had lunch with him. And we're going to paint what I did this morning. He could do one in 4 hours. So we were going to paint this afternoon what I did this morning. I'm going to show you how to do that.
Yeah.
So he taught me how to stretch canvases, how to lay out the paint, what kind of paint to use, paint up linseed oil, and all the whole thing. You know?
What kind of subject matter was he?
He painted bluebonnets of Texas,
Yeah, of course.
flying ducks,
Yeah.
geese, ducks, all kind of ducks and geese, sitter dogs and flying quail, pheasant, fall and winter and spring of South Texas. He actually had an encounter with Robert Wood at one point.
So he had kind
Now,
of.
Mr. Thrasher started as a young man. His first painting was door to door, selling for $5. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Uneducated, and so at the end of fast forward at the end of the first 2 weeks, I had 11 paintings. He said, "Now look, Jerry, you take one roll of canvas. It'll cost you $11. Frederick's duck cotton canvas, and you can get 11 24 36s out of that. So that means they're $11 for the canvas. It costs you $1 a piece, and you got 50 cents in your stretcher, and that's what you start with. It's a really good game," he said.
That's a good game.
So
That's funny.
at the end of the day, he said, "Why don't you come back and spend next year, and you'll have 3 weeks." So I go home, and I approach my distributive education teacher, and I go like, "Mr. Andrews, I want to quit the bank. I'm decided I want to switch careers. I want to be an artist for a living." He goes, "No, you can't do that." And I said, No.
I'm doing it.
We need to talk about this. Why can't I do that? Well, we don't have a program from that. I said, "Well, you can make one. Not hard." "No, we can't do that." I said, "Now look, now reason with me. I'm working at the bank. This program's set up to teach children, kids that don't feel bent toward education in a college. And I have some trouble with that, so go to the school board and ask them, why can't I learn through this program to be self-employed?"
Right.
Okay, you got a point there. Yeah, I got a point. So the short of the story is they agreed to do it. So I go home and I tell my dad, "Dad, they're going to let me do this program."
Oh, I can see where this is going.
And so but he said I have to have a working studio.
Yeah.
Dad had already turned in the back patio of their new house to my studio, but you can't paint there. You can't paint at home. You gotta have a business. The school's thinking of renting some, and my dad just volunteered and said, "Well, where do you want it? What do you want? What? The studio? Where do you want the studio?"
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. He said, "How about my stock farm? It's a mile out of town. So I'll build you a studio. What do you want it to look like?" As Mr. Thrasher's studio.
Yeah, I bet, right?
It's the only thing experience I had.
Yeah,
So
of
it's
course.
laid out just as like Mr. Thrasher's.
Right.
My dad paid $4,000 to build me a studio in 1962,
Oh, wow.
18 by 24. And then I sold $4,000 worth of paintings my senior year. So I was a DE student, working DE student, self-employed my senior year.
So would you go and you do your school and then run to the studio?
I had to go from 8 to 12.
Yeah.
Then I had to be at work at 1 o'clock, and however, but I had to do 1 to 5
Yeah. But that would be in your studio.
in my new studio.
Yeah.
So before he built the studio, or as he's building the studio, he has a coffee shop of buddies, and he's saying, "Well, this is West Texas speaking." He said, "Now Jerry wants to quit the bank and go to painting pictures for a living."
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ladies, there's a half a dozen farmers and their wives, and one of them spoke up and said, "Well, Clarence, if he wants to paint pictures, you need to take him to Taos." Never heard it before in my life.
Yeah.
And he goes like, "Why would I want to take him to Taos?" Well, that's full of, there was no way to explain what a Taos founder was.
Right.
You know, there's a bunch of artists there, and there's an art colony, and Well, Clarence, just take my word. You need to take the boy to Taos.
Yeah, that's where all the pictures are made.
All the pictures are made. So Dad comes home and explains what it said. So you want to go? I said, well, yes, let's go.
Yeah.
So interestingly, now this is my senior year. I have a studio, and
a gallery, really, right? It's
a gallery because it was a showroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we drive to Taos. We drove past 6 hotels in Taos. This is 1962. To the Kachina Lodge. Mm-hmm. And in it I see, I can't even tell you how many it was, but Mr. Limeberry, who built the Kachina,
right,
and also founded the Taos Art Museum.
Right.
There's all lined in the lobby of the hotel. And I'm going like, and I thought Mr. Thrasher could paint.
Yeah.
I'm speechless. Okay, this is the image I would like to, how do they do that? And I was studying them like this, you
Right,
know?
yeah.
And so that's written in this book, but it's ironic how, in coincidence or in God's timing, things work out and point you in your direction. Mm-hmm. And so at that moment, I decided I want to paint like this. So Marilyn and I was engaged at 19 years old. We're now 19. We got engaged for marriage at that on that trip, and we returned a year later when we were 20, mm-hmm. and had a honeymoon at Kachina. And
was that really because of the paintings mainly? You go, let's go back.
Oh no, absolutely,
Yeah.
without question.
I figured as much.
Jane Hyatt was in business at
Yeah,
that time.
right.
She had Taos Founders paintings.
Mm-hmm.
There was Tom and Sally Lewis with the Taos Art Gallery. The Reynoldses across the street, Charles Reynolds. Mm-hmm. And Gallery A was there with Mary Sanchez.
Right.
And the Mission Gallery was there, which is now the Cal Sharp site.
Right.
So I mean, I landed in Taos in 62,
Yeah.
63. We engaged in 63. We married in 64 when we was 20.
Yeah.
We lived at the Taos Inn a year later, running the Taos Inn Art Gallery.
Hmm.
I met individuals who were in business, art business, who favored me, and one of them offered us a job for this coming season. They'd had an Indian woman that was a caretaker of the gallery who had quit, so they didn't have anybody. So Marilyn and I moved into the Taos Inn, the building right behind the Taos Inn lobby,
Right.
the Sandoval House. We stayed a whole season.
That was 65?
That was in 65. Yes. We married in 64. This was now 65. But see, the galleries would close and go to Scottsdale in the winter. Mm-hmm. No ski valley yet.
Right.
So I just had a season. And this is my first introduction to how galleries function and how they're supposed to be ran.
Because you were selling art for that.
I was
the Taos
trying
Inn.
to sell art for these people.
Yeah.
They also had the Plaza Gallery in the La Fonda Hotel downtown. The satellite or the sister was Taos Inn. And it was a learning experience, and it's another whole story altogether. So we went, but you know, my parents built us a brand new house right next to my studio for a wedding setup. And I was too young to understand the importance of being in Taos fully. Mm-hmm. It looked more advantageous to be at home painting on my own. I had to paint in a dirt floor out behind the Taos Inn with no lights. So I had to paint from 5 to something, you know.
Right.
And once I had a painting, I hung it on the wall, and I still had that painting. I was so proud of that, and I hung it up on the wall. It was like a 60 by 40 still life. Mm-hmm. And the owner of the gallery comes in and said, "What is this?" And I'm going like, "That's my new painting." He said, "Well, I'd like to see how quick you can get it off the wall."
That's pretty brutal.
And so I hid it behind the bed and didn't look at it again.
I'm sure. Yeah, it's devastating for somebody.
Devastating.
Yeah.
That's a good lesson, because I do not approach any artist with that kind of spirit.
Correct.
A really
Nor
good
do
lesson.
I. Yeah.
Any level the person's on, that's where they are.
Correct.
And they at that moment think it's the grandest thing they've ever painted.
That's right. And look at you. So you did paintings that weren't maybe very good at that time. Now look where you are.
Yeah.
You know, so just because you're at one level at one point in your life doesn't mean you're not going to get to the very top, because you very well might.
You have a lot of hard knocks, and that's what this book's about. Now we're really to the heart of this whole story. There's a lot of hard knocks as an artist trying to become an artist.
Yeah.
But
Terribly
it's the same
difficult.
thing as an art dealer,
It's harder.
as a writer, as a physician. I don't care what profession you are gifted in.
Yeah.
It's a hard road.
Yeah, they all are, but some are harder. I think writing,
harder.
I think artists, musicians.
Artists have
I think
a
those are very
different
tough.
bag of
Very
things
hard
to carry.
Yeah.
So,
And so this is like when you're in Taos at that summer. This is your first year of marriage, like 65.
we were married a year.
Yeah. So what about Vietnam? Because it was starting to really cook.
I was almost drafted.
I would think, because you don't have a school deferment, right?
No. And so I'm living in Taos when I went back on a weekend to Brownfield to join the National Guard.
Yeah.
I had a cousin who was in the National Guard. That's what my exposure was. I'm like, well, that sounds better than Vietnam.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was young enough to not appreciate what war was about, and I'm not real sure I yet understand that. So I joined the National Guard. So for 6 years, I was in the National Guard. So that took care of that part. We moved from Taos back to Brownfield, into my house, into my studio, and I began painting. Having had already that year prior, in 65, in 64, I was, 63, I graduated from high school. That year I painted and sold $4,000 worth of paintings.
And were you just local primarily?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd go to new houses.
Yeah.
I can paint, Mr. Thrasher, look. Mr. Thrasher painted still lifes, still seascapes, blue bonnets, fall scenes, winter scenes, flying ducks, flying geese. There was something to hang in every room.
Right.
So I'd do a dining room and over the
new
couch in
house
the
and get
bedroom,
new pretty paintings.
And so because Mr. Thrasher sold them at 100 framed or 150, I thought mine should be the same.
Yeah, that's good. That was good if you're getting that.
So now, today I also recognize youngsters think theirs is worth $3,000 off the lot,
Or more.
or more. And so I do get it. And so that was how I was able to sell so many paints. Okay. But now I'm peddling them door to door.
Yeah.
More or less. And so I get...
God, you wanted it, didn't you?
I mean, yes.
You really wanted it.
So I decided, I would like to have a gallery. I'd already had the experience.
Right.
And so I had gotten one of Marilyn's cousins. His name was Jack Drake. And Jack Drake was a bird carver. I mean, excellent.
Right. Real art for a lot of the people. Huh?
Real art.
Yeah.
And so I had gotten him into the Baker Company in Lubbock and become friends with James and his name escapes me. Two brothers owned the Baker Company. They had a furniture, office supply store downtown, downstairs. But upstairs they turned into a fine arts gallery. I'm sure they were art lovers, by how they got started. But they actually started Wilson Hurley.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, you could get a Wilson Hurley, a big painting, for $1,500, and that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I was mesmerized. How can you paint? I was getting 100.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I approached James. Would you consider looking at some paintings for the gallery? He said, sure. I'd already got him introduced to Jack Drake.
Right.
Well, Jack Drake was selling like crazy. All right. So I go home and I paint 16 paintings. He said, paint me about 16 paintings. So I paint 16 paintings. Flying ducks, cedar dogs,
right.
The whole gamut. And so, oh, by the way, John Meggs is now our curator for the gallery. And he will be who you'll have to talk with.
Yeah.
So I take them in, we're setting them all up. And John Meggs could have learned a lot as to how to address a young artist.
Right.
And so he says, well, Jerry, you just kind of paint all over the place. Oh? That's what Mr. Thrasher did.
Right.
You need to settle on one thing. So you just figure out a genre that you like, pick out one of these. And You to make it as an artist, you got to be known for something. So you just choose what, but we can't use you. Now, in retrospect, I like to refer back to that story and go like, Mr. Meigs had a grand opportunity. To Jerry, you just paint all over the place, but I got some information that you might enjoy hearing. Is you need to zero in on one thing and paint
find
that
your
job.
voice.
So why don't you choose one of these that's your favorite and bring me 16 of those.
Right.
And let's start looking at those. And he could have tutored me into development sooner.
Yeah.
That was on him. So that lesson has taught me a lot. So I go home and I take those 16 paintings and put them to the wall in my new studio. I didn't even go into it for 3 months.
Yeah, he really hurt you.
It was, okay. I was pedaling door to door. I'd went in a gallery. I'd been in a gallery. I'd exposed what that looks like.
Right.
Well, it was just, for my insecurities, it was too much. So I decided to quit. I ended up selling. Okay, this is very hurtful for me to even address and embrace. But I sold my studio and my house, everything in it. Paintings on the wall, the drapes, the furniture, the whole thing, and walked out. And everything in my studio. I didn't have an easel or nothing left. And I decided to move to Tennessee, Chattanooga, Tennessee.
It was all because of that curator that said,
yeah. I had met some people from Tennessee.
Yeah.
And I'd gotten discouraged during that 3 months that I didn't go to the gallery. I hooked up with some people that was going to sell Holy Land trips. We were out of the gospel quartet years, you know.
Right.
And so in that process, I met this couple and these families from Chattanooga who were very befriending, and they were in real estate and decor and decorating and stuff. So that was my open door. So I'm going to sell out and go out there. I'm going to be a real estate tycoon. And it didn't work out. And so after not being able to pay the rent, eventually, after we used all the money from the escrow or the profit from the house, equity, my brother, who had singing in a gospel quartet, had quit and was living with us, as he would go back to Midwest, Nebraska, Kansas, and those sorts of things, and still singing in churches. And so he had a date outside of Atlanta, and I said, I'm going to go with you. We'd already done a little album together, and we can't pay the rent, so we're going to go see how this goes.
Right.
And the rent was $150, and our income for the offering was $187.50. I'm going like, okay, that pays the rent and $37 for gas. This is not a bad deal. We could do this every weekend, couldn't we? We did that 9 years.
Wow. All singing, gospel.
Gospel music.
Right. And would you go to churches or would you go?
Churches.
Yeah.
And initially churches.
Yeah.
And so we began singing in 71. Moved in 69. 71 we started singing. And at some point, I was given this cassette tape at a church through a pastor. That pastor only died here 3 weeks ago. But he was a pastor of a Nazarene church. And he had this little tape, a comedy thing called Phone Call from God. I want to play with this for you. This makes me think of you. I think you could do this. And I listen to it and I go like, I don't think so. He was a Baptist lay pastor, lay minister, layman, and he wrote the dialogue and did it in a real dry humor, just low-key, and I didn't really respond to it. But my mother was with us on this trip, and she said, "That's funny. Jerry, you could do that at my young people's program this coming Saturday night. I don't have time to do a program." "No, I don't want to do that." "No, you're going to do that." "I don't want to do that."
Right.
I said, "You're going to do it."
Your mom. Yeah. So you did it.
So Marilyn, my wife, transcribed the information, and I learned how to kind of get through it. in our local church, and they sit and looked at me like this.
Yeah, I bet. A comedy guy coming in.
This is the most sacrilegious thing I've ever heard in my life. My britches were wet by the time I got through doing that thing. And I'm going like, I ain't never doing that again.
Yeah.
Don't ever ask me. It's over.
And was that all original material that
Yeah.
you were writing? Yeah, so you basically
It was
did-
his material.
Yeah. Oh, so you redid his stuff.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
retwisted it.
Yeah.
I was an addict fan of Gunsmoke.
Yeah.
I loved Chester.
Yeah.
So I used Mr. Dillon. This is not the thing to do. I'm telling you, this ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
I used that approach to deliver this dialogue, this manuscript. And so we were going back to the same church 3 weeks later for a weekend, a long week revival. The preacher's going to speak and we're going to sing. And so my brother says, you're going to do that phone call on so-and-so date, because they've already requested all the things 3 times, and we done sung them 3 times. We're going to have something new. I don't want to do that, bub. Well, you are, and I did.
Yeah.
Fast forward. That's in 70.
1 or so.
Well, we started singing in 71, so this is probably 73.
Okay.
We ended up selling 14,000. We ended up doing an album.
Yeah.
First of all, I turned them down for years. We sold 14,000 albums. MCA Records, a scout producer for MCA Records, approached me and produced it. And it sold 200,000 the first 4 weeks.
Wow.
And took off and was #1 in country music. I was Comedian of the Year in 76. Fast forward in 77, a new guard came over. It's like the gallery reselling.
Yeah.
And they're going like, you know, we need to revamp this. Can you paint modern?
Right.
You know, what are you going to do next?
Right. Can you change up your routine?
Change your routine. And what are you going to record next? And I said, well, I made a mistake. I said, well, you know, me and God's talked about everything I can think of. I'd already done a second album, which I wrote,
Right.
talking to God on a CB radio.
Yeah.
And they get, well, based on that, we're going to not renew your 3rd-year contract. Oh, really? Well, I could have answered that better if I'd have known that.
Yeah.
You want to redo it? So,
And you're probably making some fairly good money.
yeah, we'd make the money.
Yeah.
Because then you weren't just getting $20 a night at offering in a church.
Yeah, you're #1 country.
Yeah, that's what switched over to country music too, sweet gospel and country music too. So when they did that, I'm going, you know, it's not really fun going up and down the highway for 10 years now, 9 years.
Right.
Sleeping in the car. We started out in the car. We had a motorhome, had a couple motorhomes.
Did you think of yourself as a comedian at that point?
I'm not a comedian.
No, but
I
did
just
you?
learned- No.
Even then, even with winning the award and all, you still didn't, right? Okay.
I can deliver it,
Yeah.
but it wasn't, I want to be a comedian, man.
Right.
It's just like, well, you got to do something to make some money. And
Right. It was a means.
I was
to
good
an
at
end.
it. I was
Yeah.
really good at it.
Yeah, but it didn't drive you. It wasn't
And
like
then
painting.
there is the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's where I'm getting to the story.
Yeah.
When they didn't renew the contract, I am so weary of hamburgers at the truck stop, and I just need a break. And
Right.
what I really want to do is paint.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd had a sabbatical long enough and I think it's as important for any of us. You did it as a physician.
Yeah.
It's important that we learn to choose and choose by experience well.
Yeah.
And I'd rather paint.
Yeah.
I'd already lived in Taos.
Right.
Already worked in the gallery.
Right.
I'd already sold pretty good paintings.
Yeah. You already made a living as a painter.
Yeah. And so I want to go back to painting. But we sold the motorhome and we traveled in a car locally for a season. But interestingly, my brother ended up selling my paintings door to door. We tried to make a living, you know.
Yeah.
And he would, I'm literally door to door.
Yeah. No, I get it.
So the man that offered to buy my first book was one of his clients
Back in the day.
back in the day.
Wow.
And my brother was quite a salesman.
Yeah. Anybody who does door to door is got to be a good salesman.
So went back to painting, 1978,
Okay.
and it's been uphill ever since.
Yeah.
But I never dreamed. I didn't even have a dream. I didn't even dream of it. I didn't think to dream of it. Of reaching this level of
Fame, really.
success and acclaim and what all that is.
Yeah.
But listen, I mean, we sang in Madison Square Gardens. We had 25,000 people. I sang at the Grand Ole Opry, the Ford Theater. We had some acclaim. We reached it to a point that we got a taste of it, an experience of it. That gave me a reference point when it came time to work on my career again.
Yeah.
So the fame now that you might speak of, I don't even think of it as that.
No, you've done it before, first of all, and that's not why you're doing it. You're
And that's not why I'm doing
You're painting for you.
I know what fame feels like.
Yes.
And I just got pushed into it. Just
Yeah.
look, they called me one night and said, "You're going to be on the Opry next Friday night." No. And I didn't, So I learned to act like I knew what I was,
Right.
what I was doing.
Yeah.
To the point that the book and my show in October is only the results of a lot of work.
Yeah, of course.
And so my message is for these young artists is that you can do this,
Yes.
and it's an uphill climb. So don't ever think you're going to arrive, because I felt several times, well, this is it.
Right.
Till I realized it's on the beginning.
Yeah, because you're like in your mid to late 30s when you start your...
32 when the phone call hit. I just turned 80.
Yeah.
Can you get over that? In 1975, I was with a hit on the MC Records. And now, Marilyn and I both the same age. We just turned 80.
Yeah.
So, with all that experience, when I was preparing for this show that we did at Legacy in October,
Yes.
I was asked for 20 paintings and told this is probably the hardest job you've ever done in your life. And I go like, really? How's that? Well, I'm just told that suddenly the request to do that and can cause some stress. I had no idea. It was just it was very similar to being told it's going to do the Grand Ole Opry next Friday night.
Yeah.
It felt the same way.
Yeah.
In fact, all those years felt the same way. Felt the same energy, the same fear, the same anxiety,
Right.
the same hope as my art show did. And so it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life,
And why was that?
because I was comparing myself to other shows that the galleries had done, for one thing.
Mm.
I didn't think of myself as a comedian,
Right.
and yet was Comedian of the Year.
Got it.
And all of a sudden, I'm not a Western painter. Do you realize I'm not a cowboy?
Probably more cowboy than most if you grew up in Lubbock
And go
on a
like,
ranch.
So it felt the same.
Yeah, I got it.
And I've got to do fanfare with Loretta Lynn. I'm going like, I've got to be at an art show up against Martin Greeley,
Yeah, all that. I get it.
who sold,
Right.
so can I do that? I don't know. Dear God,
Yeah.
can I do that? But listen, in all of this year is what I've boiled it down to experience. I'm not really caught up in the sale of a painting. It's the final, I love it, gratuity thing.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I think we're all drawn to a gift that's planted in our DNA.
Mm-hmm. I
It's
hope so.
what really kind of stirs us on. It's just like, if you learn to listen to it,
Yeah, internally.
you'll be drawn into it.
Right.
And oftentimes we think it's going to be a breeze, and that's when we find out it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But that's part of the cost. It's like going to a gym, and you eventually will build yourself up to a greater set of strength if you'll do this. So I'm going like you're gifted with a implanted bent. Some are cognitive, intellectual, where others are artistic. if I were I don't know how happy I would have been as a banker.
Not very.
See, I could have done it.
Yeah.
I could have done it.
Yeah.
So I like to say we're gifted with this within our DNA. We like to ride on the backs of hope. We're riding on the back of hope, with a pointed toward our dream, whatever that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that hope that drives us. But it's also the reward we get in riding the horse or riding through this walk.
Right. It's the process, the journey.
And the payment is reaching that
Gratitude, really.
that success level. Yeah. So in that sense of reaching a level of being honored enough that someone's willing to pay money for your representation of your gift, whatever that is,
Right.
cannot become egotistical gratification.